Take a look at these 4 kids. These preschool teachers watched a video of them playing for a 2016 study. The study asked them to press the enter key every time they saw a behavior that could become a potential challenge. But the thing about the study is it's kind of deceptive. There's actually no misbehavior in the video. The kids are actors, and the researchers were using eye tracking software because what they really wanted to know was when teachers expect misbehavior, who are they watching? The study found that both white and black teachers spent more time gazing at black boys than other children. Black boys make up less than a quarter of the nation's preschoolers, but more than 40% of preschool suspensions. The study's lead researcher told the Washington Post that implicit biases don't begin with black men and police. They begin with black preschoolers and their teachers, if not earlier.
So that video that you just seen was about how black boys are more heavily discriminated against in preschools, right? And here's the study here. It says implicit bias may help explain high preschool expulsion rate for black children. And it says track these eyes. Which students are the teachers watching? As we can see, black boys 42%, black girls only 10%. White girls, 13%, and white boys, 34%. It says preschool teachers tend to more closely observe blacks than whites, especially black boys, when challenging behaviors are expected. So now, let's actually define what implicit bias is. So this is the American Psychological Association, implicit bias. It says implicit bias, also known as implicit prejudice or implicit attitude, is a negative attitude of which one is not consciously aware against a specific social group. Implicit bias is thought to be shaped by experience and based on learned associations between particular qualities and social categories, including race and/or gender. Individuals' perception and behavior can be influenced by the implicit biases they hold. Even if they are unaware they hold such biases, implicit bias is an aspect of implicit social cognition, the phenomenon that perceptions, attitudes, and stereotypes can operate prior to conscious intention or endorsement. Right? This is from National Institute of Health, implicit bias. Let's get more on this, right? It says implicit bias includes the subconscious feelings, attitudes, and prejudices and stereotypes an individual has developed due to prior influences and imprints throughout their lives. Individuals are unaware that subconscious perception, instead of fact and observation, affect their decision making. So, when a black boy goes to school, the teachers, whether it be white or black, have an implicit bias against the black boy, right? They automatically assume he's going to have the worst behavior. They don't know about that, right? Because it's subconscious, right? They automatically see a black boy, oh, he might be a troublemaker. Where do they get this information from, right? Where do they get this implicit bias from? This subconscious understanding and stereotype that black boys is going to be a troublemaker. Could it be entertainment? Could it be perception in the media, right? Could it be that over the years, all these crime bills and how black men are constantly shown on TV going to prison, right? Because they're discriminated against in the school and prison pipeline, that reinforces the implicit bias, causing teachers to believe that black boys are more troublemakers. Could that be a self-reinforcement system, a self-reinforcing system where everything is linked, right? Possibly. And matter of fact, it probably is, right? So now let's continue with the Yale study. This is the Yale study right here, Yale Child Study Center. And you could I downloaded the PDF It's from the same website, right? Just type in here, Yale School of Medicine. Type this in. Implicit bias may help explain high preschool expulsion rates for black children. This was September 28, 2016 by Bill Hathaway. Right here. And you see this right here? School implicit bias policy brief. This is where the study where, even though the students were well behaved, the eye tracking system focused on the black boys 42% of the time. There's some highlights that I want to highlight in this, right? So when you click that link, this is where you get the whole study, right? You can download it on PDF if you want to. It says, abstract, preschool expulsions and the disproportionate expulsion of black boys have gained attention in recent years, but little has been done to understand the underlying causes behind this issue. This study examined the potential role of preschool educators' implicit biases as a viable partial explanation behind disparities in preschool expulsions. Participants were recruited at a large conference of early educators and completed 2 tasks. In task 1, participants were primed to expect challenging behaviors, although none was present. You see, while watching a video of preschoolers balanced by sex and race, engaging in typical activities, as the participants' eyes gaze were tracked. In task 2, participants read and standardized vignette of a preschoolers with challenging behavior and were randomized to receive a vignette with the child's name implying either a black boy, black girl, white boy, or a white girl, as well as a randomized to receive the vignette with or without the background information on the child's family environment. Findings revealed that when expecting challenging behaviors, teachers gaze longer at black children, especially black boys. Findings also suggested that implicit bias may differ depending on the teacher's race. Providing families' background information resulted in lowered severity ratings when teacher and child race was matched, but resulted in increased severity ratings when their race did not match. No differences were found based on recommendations regarding suspension and expulsion, except that black teachers in general recommended longer periods of disciplinary expulsions regardless of the child's gender or race. Recommendations for future research and policy regarding teacher training are offered. So I just read the abstract. We're going to go down, right? You can read this for yourself, right? It's pretty long. It's a lot, right? But there's one key highlight that I want to read, right? It says, you can keep scrolling down. This right here, discussion. Do early educators expect boys, blacks, and black boys to misbehave? Now this is crucial. They expect boys in general to misbehave, right? White boys, black boys. Then is blacks, black girls, black boys. Now is this exclusively black boys to misbehave? So we seeing that there's a correlation here. They expect boys to misbehave, right? But then they expect blacks to misbehave even more. And now they expect black boys to be the worst of behaviors. This is how it is, right? Do early educators expect boys, blacks, and black boys to misbehave? That's crucial. It says, our findings demonstrate that early education staff tend to observe more closely blacks and especially black boys when challenging behaviors are expected. These findings are important to consider given that no behavior challenges were present in the videos, suggested in part that preschool teachers may hold deferential expectations of challenging behaviors based on the race of the child. This is consistent with the robust literature that evidences disproportionate rates of disciplinary referrals and exclusionary practices for black boys that are not better accounted for by other factors. Of note, these eye-tracking results closely correspond with participants' conscious appraisal of which child they felt required the most of their attention, with black boys being endorsed and requiring the most attention by 42% of early education staff, 68% more than expected by chance alone. Additionally, boys in general were endorsed as requiring the most attention by 76% of early education staff and 52% more than expected by chance alone, consistent with research showing that boys, regardless of race, are at greater risk for classroom removal, regardless of the nature of the underlying biases. The tendency to observe more closely classroom behaviors based on sex and race of the child may contribute to greater levels of identification of challenging behaviors with black preschoolers and especially black boys, which perhaps contributes to the documented sex and race disparities in preschool expulsions and suspensions. So, these students, as you remember in the video, they were well behaved. But boys in general are more likely to be focused on by the teachers, right? Black boys are more looked upon by the teachers as being misbehaved. So we already see implicit bias, right? And this implicit bias, right, by both white and black teachers causes black boys to automatically dislike schools. If I'm coming to school as a preschooler and in your mind, subconsciously, you believe I'm going to be a troublemaker, you're going to punish me harder, more harshly than the other students because you already have a bias and a preconception in your mind that black boys are troublemakers. And you wonder why black boys hate school, right? It starts from early. From early. Oh, man. Now, you could continue reading this for yourself if you want to, but this is very interesting right here. They'll tell you why white preschoolers and black preschoolers focus on more on the black boys. This is very interesting. It says, are behavioral expectations by early educators related to biases regarding boys, blacks, and black boys? Question mark. The nature of these implicit biases appear to differ based on the race of the early educator. When family background information was withheld, white teachers appear to hold black preschoolers at a lower behavioral standard, whereas black teachers hold these black schoolers at a very high standards, pay particularly high amounts of attention to behaviors of black boys, and in general tend to recommend harsher exclusionary discipline. Wow, this is important. So white teachers automatically have a lower expectation of behavior standards for black boys. So when a white teacher sees a black boy, they automatically know, they automatically subconsciously, right, believe that black boys are going to behave the worst. Now, it's the opposite effect for black teachers. The reason why black teachers punish black boys harsher because they have a higher expectation. Ain't that crazy? And it says right here, black teachers hold black preschoolers to a high standards and particularly high amounts of attention to behaviors of black boys, and in general tend to recommend harsher exclusionary discipline. Wow. So the white teachers don't expect nothing from us, so they punish us even harder. The black teachers, they expect us to behave well. They expect higher standards, so they punish us even more. That's interesting. It says for white early educators, these findings regarding appraisals of severity are consistent with shifting standards theory, where an underlying stereotype bias, i.e. black preschoolers being viewed as more likely to exhibit the challenging behaviors that results in expulsion and suspension, results in a tendency for white teachers to appraise children primarily in contrast with their stereotype, i.e. black preschoolers compared to expectations for black preschoolers. White preschoolers compared to expectations of white preschoolers. In other words, perhaps white early education staff tend to hold an implicit bias that black preschoolers are more likely to engage in challenging classroom behaviors. So a vignette about a black child with challenging behaviors is not appraised as being unusual, severe, or out of ordinary, resulting in lower behavior ratings. In the case of the present study, a vignette describing pronounced challenging classroom behaviors in the absence of a potentially explanatory family background information may not seem very severe at all for a black child. Right here. They don't expect nothing. They expect us to act out regardless, no matter what. No matter what, white teachers. Now, it says these potentially lower expectations held for students based on race can have detrimental consequences over time, with low expectations, particularly from minority children, being linked to less favorable outcomes. As an alternative explanation, perhaps white educators simply are reluctant to express negative appraisals of performance for students of color. However, if the white participants were simply displaying an avoidance of negative appraisal of black children on the vignette, it remains puzzling why those same white participants would display a clear tendency to gaze longer at black children and endorse the black boy at higher rate during the eye tracking task. So they look at black boys, they probably subconsciously, they don't even realize that. They don't even realize that they're expecting the worst behaviors from black boys. Now, this is interesting though. In contrast, for black early educators, these severity findings may represent higher expectations held by black educators for black students. These findings might suggest that more severe behavior ratings could reflect higher standards by black educators for black children. For both black and white early educators, these differing biases may be based on an expectation of black children engaging in more frequent challenging classroom behaviors consistent with what was found during the eye tracking task across all participants, especially black participants, in relationship with their expectation regarding black boys. Now, this is interesting. At least the black teachers, right, they have a higher expectation from us as black boys, right? Preschoolers, right? But this higher expectation from black teachers causes them to punish black boys more harshly. This is interesting. Right? So their eyes are, the black teachers, the black early preschoolers, they look at the black boys and the blacks in general, expecting a higher behavioral standard for these black boys because they look at them even more. This is interesting. This is fascinating, right? So they tend to punish us harsher. Why is that? Could it be maybe that they know that life is going to be tough for us when we graduate school, that, could they be preparing us for the hardships of the world out there? Could be. We don't know. But these are the studies. You can read it, go all the way down, read it, But now I'm going to show you, this is a Yale study. I'm going to show you an Oxford study, right? Why black boys probably hate schools, and you'll see it. So this is Oxford Academic, Social Forces, and the article, it says, examining the black gender gap in educational attainment, the role of exclusionary school discipline and criminal justice contact. This is by Marissa E. Thompson. You can download it if you want to. The PDF is right here, right? And here's the abstract. It says black men and women. So this is not even about whites any longer. It is doing a comparison between black men and black women, right? Black men and black women have different levels of average educational attainment, yet few studies have focused on explaining how and why these patterns develop. One explanation may be inequality in experiences with institutional punishment through exclusionary school discipline and criminal justice exposure, drawn on intersectional frameworks and theories of social control. I examine the long-term association between punishment and the black gender gap using data from the children of the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth 1979 cohort. Decomposition analysis reveal, right, that about 1/3 of the gender gap can be explained by gender differences in experiences in institutional punishment. Net of differences is observed behaviors. These measures are predictive at key educational transition points, including finishing high school and earning a 4-year college degree. Though black boys and girls have similar family backgrounds and grow up in similar neighborhoods, results suggest that black girls have a persistent advantage in educational attainment due in part to lower levels of exposure to exclusionary school discipline and the criminal justice system. You can continue reading. So, this here is suggesting that black girls have an advantage over black boys. Interesting, right? So black boys, right, they're more heavily persecuted, right, than black girls are because of expulsions in schools. I just read The Implicit Bias, right, by Yale. This starts from preschool. So imagine from preschool to junior high school to high school, you're constantly, as a black man, as a black boy, you're constantly being discriminated against, right? So you're constantly getting expelled from school. You're constantly being disciplined in school, right? And to make matters worse, the criminal justice system is heavily against you. So black boys are disadvantaged. This is why black boys hate school. Now, you can read this. This study is long, but it's very interesting. But I want to highlight some key points right here, right? So, you can read this. I'm starting from right here. Right here. Upon kindergarten entry. What we read by the Yale study, right? This is, we read the Yale study of implicit bias against black boys. Now we're reading the Oxford study, right? Mind you, this is from March 2024. This is last year. This is 2025. This is March 2024. Look at this. Upon kindergarten entry, black boys and girls perform similarly on math and reading standardized tests. However, Later in childhood, educational gender gaps favoring black girls and women emerge and begin to grow. Black women make up about 65% of black college graduates, have higher levels of intergenerational educational mobility, and have a higher standardized test scores in childhood and adolescence when compared to black men. In contrast to gender gaps with other races, where women only began outpacing men in college completion in the 1980s, relative advantages for black women do not represent a reversal, but in fact a long-standing trend, as black women have earned college degrees at higher rates than black men since the 1940s. Since the 1940s. Okay. What happens in adolescence and early childhood to create such a large educational inequalities by gender? And which factors can explain the emergence of persistence of this gap? This study builds upon prior research and investigate that these two key questions are assembling a comprehensive model that decomposes the black gender gap. The timing of the emergence of the gap suggests that desperate experiences with exclusionary school discipline and exposure to the criminal justice system may be leading sources of this inequality. In the analysis that follows, I consider the extent to which exclusionary school discipline and contact with the criminal justice system help to explain the educational gender gap between black men and black women. Well, it says black men and women, but you get it. Although studies have shown that boys' early misbehaviors negatively impact their educational opportunities later in life, comparatively, less is known about how differences in punishment are associated with educational pathways while keeping constant differences in observed behaviors. So black boys, black men, the reason why you hate school is because the school hates you. The criminal justice system hates you. That's why you don't like school. This is why you're not graduating, because they already have a bias against you. They're already expelling you out of schools, discipline you harsher. And guess what? The criminal justice system is gunning for you. School to prison pipeline. It's that simple. It is that simple. This is why you hate school. This is why you're not being educated, right? This is why you're not educated, or at least educated. Because the system does not favor you. So you can read this study, download the PDF. It's very long. Read it, continue reading it. Continue reading it. Now, check this out. Forbes magazine. This is Forbes.com. Black boys less likely to be identified with special needs if they have black teachers, study finds. And this is by Nick Morrison. This is March 06, 2024. So if you're with, so automatically we see based on this title, right, that when black boys have black teachers, they're less likely to be recommended to go to special needs, right? So what is that actually telling us exactly? Based on this title alone, that means if you have white teachers, perhaps Asian teachers, teachers of other races besides black, they're more likely to recommend you, black boy, in special needs. That's insane. That's insane. It says black boys are less likely to be identified with special needs if they have black teachers, according to new study. Researchers found the connection was particularly strong among poorer students and in categories where there are more teachers' discretion, such as ADHD. Our findings add that the growing body of evidence that having access to black teachers matters to black children's educational journeys, said Cassandra Hart, a professor of education at the University of California, Davis and co-author of the study. We show that access to black teachers most strongly affects precisely the types of special disabilities placements that are more subject to teacher discretion, and therefore where the needs of services is more questionable. So it's the teacher's judgment, it's the teacher's discretion, right? The teacher's discretion that sends children to special needs. And we see that black teachers are less likely to recommend that black boys go to special needs classes or black children in general. But that's not true for other teachers of other colors. They're more likely to send black boys into special needs. Don't you find that isn't that discrimination? Isn't that discrimination? Is the teacher's discretion? And I just read the Riel study of the implicit bias. I just read that, right? And I read the Oxford study that black boys are expelled more in schools. I just read that. You see the bigger picture here. Why black men or why black boys do not get along with school? Do you see that? Could it be that these white teachers or other teachers have this bias against black boys, causing them to go to special needs, causing them to be expelled, causing disciplinary actions, right? All of these factors, right, causes black boys to not like school, drop out. They go to the school prison pipeline, and it causes this disadvantage to black boys. I'm just reading you. Think. Put all the pieces of the puzzle together, right? Previous research has found that black students are overrepresented in special education while underachieving in terms of academic attainment. Overrepresented, as well as being more likely to fall foul of school behavior policies. If you don't expect nothing from black boys, or black children in general, you're going to discipline them. You're going to say, you know what? They ain't nothing. They're not going to be nothing. So, you know what? Let me just get out of here. Move. Discipline them. Overrepresented in special education. The latest study looked at the data from North Carolina and more than 500,000 observations of black children in grades 1 to 4 and their assigned teachers. Researchers looked at the likelihood of black children being referred either to gifted services or to special education services and whether this changed if they had black teachers. While they found little difference in the likelihood of being referred to gifted services, the same was not true of referral to special education. Black children were markedly less likely to be referred to special education if they had a black teacher, an effect largely driven by the difference for black boys. Black boys were almost a fifth, 18%, less likely to be identified with a learning disability if they had black teachers. This is amazing. So the only people that are on our side as black boys is black teachers. It makes sense. Kudos. Nice. According to the study published by American Educational Research Journal, published by American Educational Research Association, It, it may be that black teachers interpret certain behaviors as simple inattentiveness rather than a disability, or that black students respond to black teachers with more engagement, said Constance Lindsay, assistant professor of educational leadership at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and co-author of the report. This is crucial. This is huge. So when white teachers look at black children, especially black boys, right? They look at this. They look at misbehaviors. They look at inattentiveness as being special needs. Black teachers, on the other hand, they look at inattentiveness not as a learning disability, but it could be that they respond better. Black children respond better to black teachers, right? And they don't look at inattentiveness as a disability. They don't look at that, right? They perhaps understand, okay, this is a child, he's not focused. And so let me find ways to engage this child into school activities. It says the effect was even more pronounced for black boys from poorer backgrounds who were less likely to be identified with disabilities when they were matched with black teachers than black boys from non-economically disadvantaged students. Black boys are less likely to be identified as having learning disabilities that involve more teacher discretion if they had black teachers. These include specific learning disabilities, health impairments such as ADHD and speech impairments. Now, I want you to understand the phrasing. Why they keep saying black boys are less likely to be identified with special needs when they're paired with black teachers. Why they keep saying that? Why do they keep saying that? It's because the reverse is ugly. Do you know how ugly it sounds that white teachers, Asian teachers are discriminating against black boys and recommending them to special needs even though they're not special needs? Do you know how ugly that sounds? This is why they have to phrase it in this manner. This is why they have to keep saying black boys are less likely to be identified with having learning disabilities that involves more teacher discretion if they had black teachers. If you say black boys are more likely to be identified as having learning disabilities, right, that involve teacher discretion if they had white teachers, that would sound really ugly. Read between the lines. Read between the lines. Well, you can continue reading this study. Continue reading this, right? It's a very good article. But you see now the whole picture that black boys do not like schools. Do not like schools at all. And this affects their educational attainment and getting college degrees, or probably perhaps even graduating high school. All of these factors all of these things play a huge factor. We're more likely to be recommended special needs if we do not have a black teacher. Implicit bias in preschoolers, right? And kindergarten, right? Preschoolers. Implicit bias, white teachers, right? And black teachers looks at us for the behavior problems where even they're focused more on us, right? And because of the criminal justice system, right? We're more persecuted than even black women. So this is why black boys are disadvantaged. Equip yourselves, black men. Now, the solution is we have to educate our own. It's that simple. We have to create our own schools and educate our own. So that way we can gain these education, right? Because black boys if black boys are not being educated, right? if they're the least educated, right? They probably don't even know these things are coming after them. They probably have like an instinctual awareness that the system don't like them. But now here's the proof. Here's the proof. Go to Yale study. Go to Oxford. Go to this article. And now we see the proof. And these are recent articles. Recent. Right? So equip yourselves, black men. Teach your black boys. Teach them. Black mothers, teach your black boys. Teach them. Don't exclude black girls, of course. Teach your children, right? Homeschooling, or create own schools, or have a brotherhood to shield black boys from this type of negative behaviors that the educational system are displaying against black boys. We need our own so we can teach our own, so we can shield our black boys, right? Because we want them educated, we want them to have jobs, we want them to do financially well. But if the school is against them, that's not going to be a possibility. Peace.